A sleek black car sliced through the city streets, its headlights casting long shadows against towering skyscrapers. Inside, Daniel Carter swirled a glass of whiskey in his hand, the amber liquid catching the dim glow of the cabin light. The scent of leather and expensive cologne filled the air, but despite the luxury that surrounded him, his mind was elsewhere. The night was like any other, silent, predictable, void of real emotion. That was the price of success. From the tinted window, he glanced at the passing blur of neon signs and hurried pedestrians, all of them chasing something: dreams, love, purpose. He had everything they wanted, yet a strange emptiness gnawed at the edges of his soul. He dismissed the thought with a shake of his head. Emotions were distractions, and distractions had no place in the life of a man like him. The car pulled into the underground parking of his high-rise, the engine's purr fading into silence. Stepping into the elevator, he loosened his tie, leaning against the mirrored walls. His reflection stared back at him, a man in his prime, powerful and untouchable. But as the elevator ascended, another image flickered in his mind, one he had tried to bury. Sophia. The name was a whisper from a past life, a ghost pressing against the walls of his heart. He hadn't spoken to her in years, yet he could still recall the way she laughed, the way her eyes burned with a passion for life that no amount of money could buy. She had been different from the women who threw themselves at him now. She had never cared about his wealth, only about him. And he had let her go, not because he wanted to, but because he had convinced himself he had to. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and he stepped into his penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline, a view he once found intoxicating. Now it just felt distant. He set his glass down, running a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Regret was pointless. He had built an empire, one deal at a time, sacrificing everything along the way. And yet, somewhere across this very city, Sophia was out there, living a life without him. Far from Daniel's world of high-rises and designer suits, a woman bent over a trash bin, her slender fingers sifting through discarded bottles. Her hair, once a cascade of golden waves, was now tied back in a messy ponytail, strands escaping to frame a face that had known both beauty and hardship. Sophia exhaled against the evening chill, her breath visible in the cold air. She wasn't ashamed of what she was doing. Pride had no place when a child depended on you. Her son, Ethan, sat on the curb a few feet away, flipping through the pages of a book that had long lost its cover. His small hands traced the words carefully, as if memorizing them. The streetlights cast a soft glow on his face, highlighting his delicate features, the same sharp cheekbones and deep-set eyes that had once belonged to another man. A man he had never met. Sophia straightened, dusting off her worn-out jacket. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's head home." Ethan looked up with a sleepy smile, closing his book. "Did we get enough?" She forced a smile. "Almost." The truth was, they hadn't. The hospital bills weighed heavy in her pocket, crumpled from being clenched too tightly. Ethan's persistent cough was getting worse, and she knew she was running out of time. But what choice did she have? The world didn't wait for struggling mothers, and charity was a luxury she couldn't afford. As they walked toward their small rented room, a place barely held together by peeling paint and hope, Sophia's thoughts drifted, unbidden, to Daniel. It had been so long, yet there were nights she still saw his face in her dreams, nights she still wondered if he ever thought about her. But then she would wake up to reality, a reality where she was alone, where she had chosen this life over being a silent trophy in his world. Regret? No. She had Ethan, and if that meant hardship, she would bear it 1,000 times over. The wind howled as they turned a corner, passing a grand restaurant with golden chandeliers visible through its towering glass doors. Inside, men in crisp suits laughed over wine, their polished lives so far removed from her own that they might as well have been from another universe. And then, through the glass, she saw him. Daniel Carter. Time slowed. Her heart clenched, her breath catching in her throat. He hadn't changed. If anything, he looked even sharper, the weight of success sculpting him into someone even more untouchable. He sat at a table, half listening to the man across from him, his fingers tapping against his glass in quiet boredom. For a split second, she wondered if he would look up. If he did, what would he see? The woman he once loved, reduced to someone he would pass on the street without a second glance? Her grip tightened on Ethan's hand. "Mom." Ethan looked up at her. "Are you okay?" She forced herself to breathe. "Yes, sweetheart. Let's go home." She turned away before the past could see her, before memories could swallow her whole. But what she didn't know was that, in that very moment, Daniel had looked up. And though it lasted only a fraction of a second, something inside him shifted. An unease, a flicker of something unfamiliar. He just didn't know why. Not yet. The night was colder than usual, a sharp wind slicing through the street. Daniel sat in the back seat of his luxury car, drumming his fingers idly against his knee as the city lights flickered past. The evening had been forgettable, another business dinner filled with empty conversation and forced laughter. Success, he had learned, had a way of making everything predictable. As the car rolled to a stop at a red light, Daniel's gaze wandered to the sidewalk. A woman hunched over a trash bin, her thin frame wrapped in a tattered coat. Her movements were careful, almost practiced, as she sifted through discarded bottles. Something about her posture, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, sent a jolt through his chest. His eyes narrowed. No. It couldn't be. The woman turned slightly, and the dim street lamp illuminated her face. Sophia. For a moment, he forgot how to breathe. She looked different, thinner, her skin paler than he remembered. But there was no mistaking those eyes, the same ones that had once met his with fire and defiance. The woman who had walked out of his life all those years ago, the woman he had told himself he would never think about again, was standing right there, digging through garbage. A sour taste filled his mouth. Was this what had become of her? His grip tightened on the leather seat. He wanted to look away, pretend he hadn't seen her. But then, a small figure stepped into view. A boy. He couldn't have been older than 6 or 7, his clothes worn but clean, a small book clutched in his hand. He reached for Sophia's sleeve, tugging gently. "Mom, can we go home now?" The word "Mom" struck Daniel like a physical blow. His pulse roared in his ears, drowning out the hum of the engine. "Mom?" His stomach twisted as his gaze flickered between them. The boy's face, there was something familiar about it. The shape of his eyes, the sharp angle of his cheekbones, a resemblance he couldn't ignore. The light turned green, but Daniel's voice cut through the silence. "Stop the car." The driver hesitated. "Sir," I said, "stop the damn car." Tires screeched as the vehicle lurched to a halt. Daniel barely noticed as he shoved the door open, stepping onto the pavement. The cold air slapped against his skin, but his body felt hot, too hot. Sophia turned at the sound of his footsteps. The moment her eyes met his, something unspoken passed between them. Shock, dread, and then resignation. She straightened, squaring her shoulders as if bracing for a storm. "Daniel." His name on her lips sent a strange shiver down his spine. He hadn't heard her voice in years, and yet it still held that same quiet strength. He stared at her, unable to mask the disbelief in his expression. "What the hell are you doing?" Her chin lifted. "What does it look like?" His eyes flickered to the bag slung over her shoulder, half filled with recyclables. His jaw clenched. "You're picking through trash, Sophia." She didn't flinch. "I'm surviving." Anger, sharp and uninvited, rose in his chest. "Is this what you left me for?" The words came out harsher than intended, but he didn't stop them. "To scavenge on the streets?" Sophia exhaled, shaking her head. "You wouldn't understand." "No, I don't," he snapped. "I don't understand how you, of all people, ended up like this." His voice dropped, laced with something dangerously close to betrayal. "You had everything, Sophia. You had me. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Exactly. The bitterness in her tone made his stomach tighten. Before he could respond, the boy stepped forward, his small hand wrapping around Sophia's. His dark eyes flicked up to Daniel with quiet curiosity. Daniel stared at him, his mind racing. The resemblance was undeniable now. His breath turned shallow. Who is this? Sophia's fingers tightened around the child's. We should go. Daniel stepped closer, his pulse hammering. Sophia. Answer me. She hesitated, just for a second. But that was enough. The truth was there, written in the slight tremor of her lips, the flicker of hesitation in her gaze. Daniel turned to the boy, his voice quieter this time. What's your name? The boy hesitated, glancing at Sophia before answering. Ethan. The name hit Daniel like a train. His throat went dry. He looked back at Sophia, searching her face for any sign of a lie. Is he? Don't, she interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. But he already knew. His world tilted, the ground beneath him suddenly unsteady. All these years, all this time, and he had a son he never knew existed. Sophia pulled Ethan closer. We're leaving. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, but the boy flinched, pressing himself against his mother's side. The sight of it, his own flesh and blood recoiling from him, sent a foreign ache through his chest. He had faced ruthless businessmen, fought cutthroat deals, built an empire with nothing but sheer willpower. But this? This made him feel powerless. He swallowed hard. Sophia, you can't just walk away from this. I already did. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held a storm. Then, without another word, she turned, guiding Ethan away. Daniel stood frozen, watching their figures disappear into the night. The air around him felt heavier, as if the city itself had shifted. 1,000 questions burned in his mind, but only one echoed loudest. How had he let this happen? Daniel couldn't sleep. The city skyline stretched endlessly before him, bathed in the glow of 1,000 lights, but for the first time, it felt hollow. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the table beside him, his reflection staring back at him through the window, a man who had built everything, yet somehow lost the one thing that mattered most without even knowing it. Ethan. The name had echoed in his mind all night, growing heavier with every passing hour. He had spent years believing his past with Sophia was a closed chapter, convinced that she had simply disappeared into the world beyond his reach. But she hadn't vanished. She had been fighting, struggling, raising his son alone. His stomach twisted. How could she have kept this from him? Did she truly believe he wouldn't have cared? A sharp knock on the door snapped him out of his thoughts. His assistant, Oliver, stepped in, phone in hand, his usual composure tinged with hesitation. Sir, I think you should see this. Daniel took the phone, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the screen. A news article. Billionaire Daniel Carter confronts homeless woman on the streets. Shocking past revealed? His blood ran cold. Below the headline was a grainy photo of him standing before Sophia, his expression tense. Another picture showed Ethan gripping her hand, his wide eyes staring at the camera. The caption beneath it twisted the knife deeper. An unknown child, could he be Carter's hidden heir? The article speculated wildly, painting Sophia as a tragic figure and Daniel as the ruthless billionaire who had discarded her. Comments flooded the page, people choosing sides, some calling him heartless, others questioning how a man of his status could abandon his own child. Anger coiled in his chest. Who took these? Paparazzi, Oliver answered. It's spreading fast. People are demanding answers. Daniel set the phone down, his jaw tightening. The media storm had begun, and with it, an avalanche of scrutiny he wasn't ready for. But none of that mattered. What mattered was Sophia. And Ethan. He grabbed his coat, ignoring Oliver's questioning glance. There was only one person who could give him the truth. The streets felt different tonight, colder, less forgiving. He found Sophia outside a small grocery store, Her bag of supplies clutched tightly against her chest. She saw him before he could speak, her expression darkening. "Are you following me now?" "You didn't give me a choice," he shot back. Sophia exhaled, shaking her head. "I told you to let this go, Daniel." His patience snapped. "Let it go? You kept my son from me." The words came out sharper than he intended, and for the first time, he saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt. She glanced around, as if worried someone might overhear. Not here. They walked in silence to the alley behind the store, away from prying eyes. When she finally turned to face him, her voice was quiet but firm. "You don't get to be angry." Daniel laughed bitterly. "You think I don't have a right to be? I find out in the middle of the street that I have a son, and I'm supposed to just accept that you never planned on telling me?" Sophia's grip on her bag tightened. "And what would you have done, Daniel? Would you have dropped your empire to play family? No. You would have thrown money at the situation, just like you do with everything else." His stomach twisted because, once, that might have been true. She took a step closer, her eyes burning with emotion. "I left because I knew where your priorities were. Business, power, reputation. You never wanted a family." His hands curled into fists at his sides. "You never gave me the chance." Sophia's gaze softened just a fraction, and for the first time, the weight of their history pressed between them. "You were so consumed with climbing higher," she murmured. "I knew that if I told you, you would have tried to fix it the only way you knew how, by controlling everything. And I wouldn't let my son be raised in a world where love was measured in numbers." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. Because deep down, he knew she wasn't entirely wrong. The silence between them stretched, the years of unspoken words pressing in from all sides. But then, Sophia straightened, her guard rising once more. "This changes nothing," she said, voice steadier now. "Ethan doesn't need you, Daniel. He has me. He's happy." The words stung more than they should have. Daniel's gaze dropped to the worn-out shoes on her feet, the faded bag in her hands. "Happy? Maybe. But safe? Healthy?" He took a slow step forward. "If he's happy, why were you digging through trash?" Her breath hitched. He had struck a nerve. Her jaw tightened. "We're fine." "You're not fine, Sophia. I saw you." His voice dropped, raw and unfiltered. "I saw you struggling. I saw the bills you tried to hide in your pocket. And I saw my son looking up at you with eyes that shouldn't know what desperation looks like." Something cracked in her expression. Just for a second. Then, she turned away. "You don't understand," she whispered. Daniel's heart pounded. "Then help me understand." She let out a shaky breath. "He's sick, Daniel." The words came so quietly, he almost didn't hear them. "It's not just a cough. It's worse." His blood turned to ice. "He needs tests. Treatment," she continued, her voice thick with something close to defeat. "I've tried everything. I'm doing everything I can. But it's not enough." Daniel didn't realize he had reached for her until his hands were on her shoulders. "Sophia," he breathed, his mind racing. She stepped back, shaking her head. "I don't need your help." He exhaled sharply. "This isn't about you. This is about him." Silence. Sophia's eyes shimmered, and for the first time, he saw the exhaustion she carried. The weight of years spent fighting alone. She turned her face away. "I can't let you buy your way into his life." Daniel took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "I don't want to buy anything." His voice was softer now, almost pleading. "I just want to be there." Sophia swallowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You had years to be there," she whispered. "And you never even knew he existed." Daniel felt the sting of those words deep in his chest. "I know now," he said. For the first time, Sophia looked uncertain. Daniel saw the war in her eyes, the battle between pride and the love of a mother who just wanted her child to be okay. And then, as if the universe had been waiting for this moment, a harsh, racking cough echoed through the alley. Ethan stood at the entrance, his small frame shaking as he struggled to catch his breath. Sophia was at his side in an instant, rubbing his back, whispering reassurances. But Daniel could only watch, his heart pounding as a terrifying realization crashed over him. His son wasn't just sick. His son needed him. And he wasn't going to let him down. The hospital room was too white, too sterile. Machines hummed softly, their quiet beeps marking the passing seconds like an invisible clock counting down. Daniel sat beside the bed, his hands clasped tightly together, watching the rise and fall of Ethan's small chest. His son. The weight of that word settled deep inside him, heavier than anything he had ever carried. Sophia sat across from him, her fingers gripping a cup of untouched coffee. She hadn't spoken much since they arrived, but Daniel could see it, the exhaustion in her posture, the fear she tried so hard to bury beneath forced composure. Ethan had collapsed in the alleyway. His body had gone limp in Sophia's arms, his breath shallow, his skin too pale. The moment had stretched into eternity as Daniel had swept him up, his heart thundering in terror. Now, hours later, the doctors had given their diagnosis: severe pneumonia. Untreated. Worsened by malnutrition and exhaustion. Daniel had wanted to break something when he heard those words. He had built an empire, accumulated wealth beyond measure, yet his own son had been suffering in silence. A quiet rustle of sheets pulled him from his thoughts. Ethan stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His dark eyes, hazy with fever, landed on Daniel. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, his voice softer than he thought possible. Ethan blinked at him, his tiny brows knitting together in confusion. "You're still here?" The question punched through Daniel like a blade. He forced a smile. "Yeah. I'm not going anywhere." Ethan stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing the truth in his words. Then, too weak to hold the gaze, he closed his eyes again. Sophia's voice broke the silence. "He'll be okay." But she didn't sound convinced. Daniel exhaled slowly. "He shouldn't have to fight this hard." His jaw tightened. "He shouldn't be here." Sophia flinched. "You think I don't know that?" His chest ached at the rawness in her voice. She sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. "I did what I had to do, Daniel." For the first time, he truly saw her, not just as the woman who had left him, but as a mother who had spent every waking moment trying to keep their child alive. His voice was quiet when he spoke again. "Why didn't you come to me?" Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "And say what?" "Hey, Daniel, remember me? The woman you once loved but didn't have time for? Surprise, I had your son, and we've been barely surviving." She shook her head. "You had your world. I had mine." Daniel's throat tightened. "I would have helped." She met his gaze then, her expression unreadable. "And would you have stayed?" The question burned through him. Before he could answer, the doctor entered, flipping through a chart. "We've stabilized him," she said. "But he'll need proper care moving forward. Regular checkups, a strong diet, and no more exposure to the cold." Daniel nodded before Sophia could respond. "He'll have everything he needs." Sophia's eyes snapped to him. "Daniel, I'm not arguing about this," he interrupted. "I let you walk away once. I'm not making that mistake again." Silence stretched between them, thick with unresolved history. Sophia swallowed hard. "And what do you want in return?" Daniel looked at Ethan, at the fragile rise and fall of his small chest. "I want to be his father." Sophia's breath hitched. Daniel turned back to her, his voice softer now. "I don't just want to write a check and disappear, Sophia. I want to know him. I want to make up for lost time." She studied him for a long moment, searching for cracks in his resolve. But there were none. Finally, her shoulders sagged, as if the weight she had been carrying for years was finally too heavy. "You really mean that?" she whispered. Daniel nodded. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but not before he saw it. For the first time in years, she didn't look like a woman fighting the world alone. She looked like someone who finally had permission to rest. The winter air felt different now, no longer bitter, no longer empty. Snowflakes drifted gently from the sky, settling on the city streets in soft, white layers. Daniel stood by the hospital window, watching the world outside with quiet contemplation. But for the first time in years, his mind wasn't on the towering buildings or the business deals waiting for him. It was on the small boy lying in the hospital bed behind him. Ethan was asleep, his breathing steady, his tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that had once terrified Daniel with its fragility. Now it was the most reassuring sound in the world. He turned slightly, watching Sophia as she adjusted the blanket over their son. There was something different in the way she moved now, less burdened, less afraid. Maybe for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to carry everything alone. Daniel had spent his life controlling outcomes, ensuring that every risk was calculated, every move strategic. But nothing had prepared him for this. For the overwhelming realization that love wasn't something you built with logic and reason, it was something you chose every single day. And he was ready to choose. Ethan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He blinked sleepily, his small voice breaking the quiet. "You're still here." Daniel's chest tightened. He crouched down beside the bed, offering a small smile. "Told you, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." Ethan studied him for a long moment, as if still unsure whether to believe him. Then, with a sleepy nod, he turned onto his side, his fingers clutching the blanket. Daniel exhaled softly, glancing at Sophia. Her eyes met his, something unspoken passing between them. A promise. Outside, the city continued on, cars rushing past, people lost in their own world. But inside this small, quiet room, something had changed. Daniel had spent years chasing success, believing that wealth was the greatest achievement he could ever reach. But as he sat beside his son, feeling the warmth of the boy's tiny hand in his own, he realized this was the only thing that had ever truly mattered.